Breaking news, a body has been found on Horn Island.
Sadly, officials say a body matching the description of the 18-year-old was recovered about 8:45 this morning just off the shore of Horn Island.
Nolan Wells' body was found on Horn Island.
About a month ago, on the 4th of July, an 18-year-old kid named Nolan Wells went on a boat with his friends off the Mississippi coast. 2 days later, his body turned up face down in the water, and nobody can tell his family how he got there. The second I heard that sentence, I had a case of deja vu. Because I made a documentary 3 years ago about a case that sounded almost identical to this one.
People are lynched. People with mysterious death that they just end up on the bank of a river. No one knows, how did he or she get there? How did it happen? How did he or she get there?
A historian named Marian Allen said that line to me from what's called the hanging bridge of Mississippi 3 years before the case that I'm going to talk to you about today. I was in Taylorsville, Mississippi back in 2023 with my colleague Dexter Thomas, and we were making a documentary for Vice News about a family who spent months searching for their son's body parts. We stood on that hanging bridge in Mississippi with Marian as she explained to us that lynchings in the South have never actually stopped. They've just changed shape. And now I'm watching another family basically experience the exact same thing.
We always taught him to, if you go with a group, you stay with a group. I always tell him, look, if you go with 5, you come back with 5. Do not separate from your group. Because I always said safety is in numbers. So he knew to stay with his group. So why would he split from his group? I don't know.
Now, no one really knows what happened to Nolan that day. It's just too early to tell. But I'm going to show you why this case is following a pattern I've already seen play out, and why I think this case is worth paying attention to before attention fizzles and the media moves on to something else. While I'm explaining what happened, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between the two cases. So in order for you not to get confused, I'm going to call the Rasheem Carter case, the one I was in Mississippi for, case 1. And the Nolan Wells case, the one that happened just a month ago, case 2. So let's start with case 1, Rasheem Carter. Rasheem Carter was 19 years old. He came to Taylorsville, Mississippi for a short contract job at a chemical plant, and he went missing in October of 2022. And now case 2, the case of Nolan Wells. Nolan was just 18 years old. He was an avid football player, rising star, and he headed out to Horn Island off the coast of Mississippi on the 4th of July to celebrate with a group of his friends. Both were young black men in Mississippi, and both disappeared in circumstances that no one has been able to explain. On October 1st, Rasheem texted his mom saying there was a truck full of white men following him and shouting racial slurs, and he told his mom he was really scared. He did the thing you're supposed to do. He went to the police and made an official report. Then he asked the police for a ride back to his hotel because he was so scared to walk back at night by himself. They said it was outside their jurisdiction and left him there in the night. With his phone battery at 1%, he texted his mother his location, and she sent a friend to pick him up. But by the time the friend arrived, Rasheem was gone. There's an official police report on file that Rasheem made, but when he went missing a few days later, the police barely mentioned it. Instead, officers started floating around the idea that he was mentally ill or on drugs, or that he had just wandered off into the forest for no reason at all. And nobody even bothered to look for him. His own family had to drive up to Taylorsville and start the search party themselves. Nolan Wells went out with a group of friends to Horn Island on the 4th of July. Somewhere in the hours that followed, something happened to Nolan Wells. And a few days later, he was found off the shoreline, face down in the water. It took 13 hours after he was reported missing for anybody to bother looking for him. And when investigators finally took notice, the witness accounts they did collect contradict each other. In both cases, Rasheem Carter and Nolan Wells, the instinct wasn't, let's figure out what happened. It was, there's nothing to see here, look the other way. By the time anyone found Rasheem, it was too late to tell what had happened to him. Almost a month later, a property owner in Taylorsville alerted law enforcement that he'd found an image of someone on his deer cam that he didn't recognize. They'd found remains they believed were Carter's in a wooded area just outside of Taylorsville. Only a skull and some fragments of vertebrae remained. Nolan's body wasn't degraded like that. but he had been in the water for 2 days before anyone found him. Now, the state haven't made his autopsy results public, so the family have been forced to run their own investigation and their own autopsy of the body. And before that autopsy was ever finished and any real investigation had concluded, the sheriff's department was already telling the public that there was no foul play suspected in Nolan's death.
Now, Sheriff Ledbetter tells me that even with the autopsy scheduled for tomorrow, he doesn't believe that there were any signs of foul play. But
I have yet to see a fact or a piece of evidence that suggests any foul play.
In Rasheem's case, once the remains were located, the Smith County Sheriff Department almost immediately said that they didn't suspect foul play. They would later backtrack on this, saying they hadn't ruled it out. To be clear, they found partial remains in a field after a young black man had reported that he was being followed by white men in a truck, yelling racial slurs at him. And within days, they're writing a Facebook post that said they don't suspect any foul play.
There was a rush to judgment about what happened, that judgment being that nothing happened. They're still finding body parts. So obviously this crime scene, it hasn't even been cased properly.
I don't know if these two cases are connected, and I don't even know if they were both lynchings. What I am saying is that when black men in Mississippi turn up dead under very suspicious circumstances, the reflex seems to be the same. Declare it was nothing, wave off the family, and treat the state's own racist history as irrelevant when looking at these cases. Rasheem's case was loud and obvious. I mean, just hours before he was reported missing, a truck full of white men were shouting racial slurs at him. I actually went to the protest march in Taylorsville where the white people in the town were outwardly shouting racial slurs at the protesters and the grieving family.
There's a crackhead come down here and for some reason something happened to him and hell nobody in town even knew who he was. And they want to blame injustice. They don't know what injustice is. They've been crying it for 4 generations.
And a police chief who posted publicly a photo of an officer power washing off graffiti that read Rasheem Carter's life mattered, captioned, "Just a little cleanup," with a little waving hand emoji. Nolan's case is quieter and discreet. There's no recorded racial slurs, no obvious hate crime you can point to. He was out on a boat with his supposed friends to celebrate 4th of July. Both of these deaths could be linked to a hate crime, we just don't know. But what is clear, abundantly clear, is the response and how quickly officials stop asking questions and how little effort there is to find answers for the grieving families. And standing at the center of both cases, 3 years apart, is the attorney Benjamin Crump.
That this was not of natural causes. This was a Mississippi lynching in 2022 of a young black man.
He said the word lynching about Rasheem Carter back in 2022. Today, he's representing Nolan's family, demanding answers on camera once again. Now let's zoom out for a second and talk about Mississippi, because I think the historical angle is something a lot of people miss out on when talking about these kinds of cases. The reason Dexter and I flew out to Mississippi in the first place wasn't just because of Rasheem's case. It was the pattern sitting underneath it. We sat down with Jill Collen Jefferson, a civil rights attorney who investigates suspected lynchings in the South.
Part of the truth that people need to realize is that in so many of these tiny places in Mississippi, Jim Crow is actually still alive. People think we're further along than we actually are. The thing is, lynchings never stopped. Because they're not in the mainstream anymore, people assume that they're not happening, but they've never, ever, ever stopped.
Mississippi has more suspected lynchings than any other state in the nation.
The lynchings of today are more high class. We use bullets and guns. So I can't hang you from a tree. People with mysterious death that they just end up on the bank of a river. No one knows how did he or she get there. How did it happen?
She said that to me years before case 2, the Nolan Wells case, ever happened. Years before his body showed up face down on the shoreline of Mississippi. She practically guessed what happened to Nolan Wells. Not because she's psychic, but because there's a pattern she's seen play out time and time again. And just this week, as I'm editing this video, another mysterious death raising questions once again in Mississippi.
This morning, growing demands for answers in Mississippi after a 29-year-old mother of 4 was found dead, hanging from a tree.
We have a possible lynching situation in 2026. We had another one in 2022. The same attorney takes it on. The media coverage explodes. There's interviews and presses and everybody's talking about it. And then there's nothing. The cameras go away, the media moves on to something else, and the families are left with no answers. That's why I'm making this video today. Not because I want to speculate, but I want to keep talking about it. I want to keep talking about it until we know what happened to Rasheem Carter and Nolan Wells. So what do you think? Do you see the similarities between these two cases? Can you think of any other cases that follow the same pattern? Let me know in the comments. I'm Gabby, and I'll see you on the next one.